I came back to Richmond because my commanding officer told me I needed a break before I burned myself out. It wasn't a suggestion, it was one of those polite military orders wrapped in concern. 14 years in Army intelligence will do that to a person, especially after a mission where things don't go the way they should. I'd spent months convincing everyone I was fine, but the nightmares kept showing up like uninvited guests. So I packed a small bag, flew home, and told myself I'd lie low for a bit. In my mind, that meant long runs, quiet mornings, and maybe some sleep that didn't involve explosions. What I didn't expect was walking straight into a disaster that made the war zone feel predictable. My sister, Victoria, opened the door with the kind of expression people get when the roof just caved in, and they're still trying to pretend it's not that bad. She was older than me by 4 years, but she looked 10 years older than that right then. There were bags under her eyes deep enough to store luggage, and her smile was one of those forced ones she used when things were going wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it yet. I knew that smile too well. She'd used it when our parents split, when she lost her first job, and when she married a guy who eventually ran off with a dog trainer he met at a farmer's market. I dropped my duffel bag and asked, "What happened?" She said, "Let's sit." Never a good sign. The living room smelled like stale coffee and stress. Papers were stacked on the coffee table in the kind of organized chaos only people in real trouble manage to create. I didn't even need military instinct for this one. Anyone could have seen something was off. Victoria kept adjusting her sleeves, switching her weight from one foot to another, and avoiding eye contact like it was radioactive. Finally, she handed me a packet of documents. At first glance, it looked like accounting paperwork. That tracked. She was a senior accountant for Marlowe Dynamics, a defense subcontractor. Nothing glamorous, but stable, at least that's what I thought. Then she said, "Alicia, they're blaming me." The files were related to a construction project, a testing facility for new sensor systems. I scanned the numbers and immediately saw the kind of discrepancies that would set off alarms. Missing funds, reallocations that didn't make sense, signatures that did make sense hers. "They told me everything was routine," she said. "They said the adjustments were normal. They said I just had to sign because the project lead was out of town." "Who's they?" She hesitated. That was answer enough. I leaned back, giving her time. Pushing her never worked. She shut down when pressured. She finally admitted the facility was the same one where Haley Kincaid, the billionaire's daughter, died in a so-called accident. A fallen beam crushed her, and the incident was blamed on faulty equipment. It made headlines for about 3 days before everyone moved on. Except apparently, Victoria hadn't. "What are you mixed up in?" I asked. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear I didn't know. But someone inside the company has been using my signature. They're trying to pin the financial discrepancies on me now that investigators are back on the case." "And what do they want?" Her hands trembled. "They said I need to cooperate, or I could face charges." I could feel the pressure building in my chest. Not panic anger. The kind that comes from seeing someone you care about trapped because someone stronger decided they were disposable. I'd seen that enough overseas. Seeing it in my own living room irritated me in a way the military never prepared me for. "That's not the worst part," she said. Of course it wasn't. She took a breath that sounded like someone stepping off a ledge. "Alicia, they told me there's another way. A way to make the charges go away. A way to protect the family." I stared at her. "And?" She swallowed. "You have to marry Charles Kincaid, the billionaire, the father of the girl who died, the man who owned half of Kincaid Systems, one of the biggest defense tech corporations in the country, a 62-year-old wheelchair-bound executive who disappeared from public view 2 years ago after a severe accident. He wasn't married. He had no heirs left. He was rumored to be paranoid, sick, and surrounded by lawyers. I waited for her to laugh, because clearly that had to be some kind of twisted joke. She didn't. She just looked at me with eyes that weren't asking, they were desperate. "They told me he needs a legal spouse," she said. "Someone he can trust. Someone with a clean record. Someone who isn't connected to internal corporate politics." "What does that have to do with no? No, absolutely not. They'll ruin me, Alicia. I'll lose everything. They'll drag me into court, and I'll go to prison. They said charges are already being drafted. I rubbed my face with both hands. And marrying a billionaire magically fixes this? It keeps him in control of his company and out of their hands. If they take over, they'll push every bit of blame down to middle management. Which means me, so they want me to sign my life away to save you. She looked down. I wish there was another way. Victoria, why me? Her voice cracked. Because you're the only person they know won't take a bribe. The only one with a military record clean enough to survive the background checks. And because they know you'd do anything for family. That part stung more than anything else, she'd said. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. She kept talking, explaining how the offer appeared out of nowhere, how the company demanded a decision within days, how she'd already been threatened by one of their internal investigators. She was scared, cornered, and exhausted, and although part of me was furious at her for being reckless, an even bigger part hated seeing her like this. Then her face crumpled. Alicia, if I go down, Mom loses the house, Dad loses his insurance, everything gets dragged into the mess. There it was, the final blow, family duty, emotional blackmail wrapped in fear, and the worst part was, she wasn't wrong. I'd spent my career cleaning up chaos in other countries. I'd survived ambushes, intelligence failures, and politicians who didn't know what they were doing. But this domestic disaster was something I never expected to land in the middle of. I read the documents again, slower this time. The financial inconsistencies weren't small mistakes. Someone inside Marlowe Dynamics was orchestrating something big, and Victoria was the perfect scapegoat because she'd trusted the wrong people. And now, apparently, I was supposed to trust someone just as bad. I closed the folder, set it on the table, and looked directly at her. Who set this up? I asked. She hesitated. Charles's private attorney. He said Charles wants someone he can rely on, someone outside the internal power struggle. He wants protection. And in exchange, he protects the family. I sat back, trying to absorb what she was asking. I wasn't naive. Marriages of convenience existed. They weren't illegal. But the timing, the pressure, the secrecy, none of it made sense. Then again, not much in my life made sense lately. She leaned forward, voice almost a whisper. Please, Alicia, you're the only chance we have. And that was how it began. Not with romance or choice or fate, just a living room full of paperwork, a family falling apart, and my sister asking me to step into a life I never wanted but suddenly couldn't walk away from. The weight of Victoria's words was still sitting on my chest when I pushed myself up from the couch and walked to the kitchen, mostly because I needed air but also because I needed something solid to hold on to. The cold granite countertop worked fine. I gripped it hard enough that my knuckles went white. If this was a negotiation tactic, it was a good one. If it wasn't, things were worse than I thought. I heard her hovering in the doorway like she used to when we were kids and she'd broken something expensive. I didn't look at her. I wasn't ready for the apology face. Instead, I asked the question that had been forming the moment she said Charles's name. What does he want from me exactly? She let out a shaky breath. A legal marriage. Public enough to be recognized. Private enough to avoid attention. That answers nothing. He needs someone who can't be manipulated by the board, by his relatives, by the people trying to force him out. He needs someone with an actual spine. Great, I said. So I'm being hired for my backbone. Alicia, please. I finally turned and saw her eyes glistening. She wasn't trying to guilt-trip me anymore. She was genuinely drowning. Whatever mistake she'd made with those documents, she didn't deserve to be eaten alive by a corporation with lawyers capable of eating congressional committees for breakfast. Before I could speak, the doorbell rang. Victoria's face drained of color. That's him, she whispered. Charles? No. His attorney. I opened the door because if I didn't, she might actually faint. The man waiting outside looked like he slept in a suit and ironed it while wearing it. Sharp, expensive, and the type who measured every person he met within 3 seconds. He extended his hand with the confidence of someone who never gets ignored. Miss Ward, he said. I'm Raymond Carter. I represent Mr. Charles Kincaid. His voice was smooth enough to be unsettling. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, glanced at the living room, and zeroed in on the paperwork like he already knew what was inside. We don't have much time. I crossed my arms. That seems to be a recurring theme today. He ignored the sarcasm. Mr. Kincaid is prepared to offer full legal protection for your sister, including covering all her potential liabilities, immediate financial assistance for your parents, and the withdrawal of all pressure from the internal auditors involved. And in exchange? I asked. He met my eyes as if preparing for a job interview. He needs a wife. I didn't blink. For what purpose? To retain full control of his company. There are internal factions attempting to remove him from the board. His health has declined, and they are using it as leverage. A legally recognized spouse provides stability and shuts down several of their strategies. So, his board wants him gone, I said. And marrying me stops that? It severely delays their ability to execute certain power transfers. It also prevents several individuals with questionable motives from claiming rights to his estate. I almost laughed. I hope you're not implying this is a romantic arrangement. Carter didn't flinch. Mr. Kincaid is 62, partially paralyzed, and has no interest in pretending this is a love match. He wants loyalty and clarity. You want your sister safe. Victoria stepped forward, shaking. Alicia, please. I kept my eyes on Carter. Why me? There are women who would marry a billionaire willingly. None with your record, he said. You can't be bribed. You can't be threatened. Your military background makes you reliable. You're also a stabilizing public figure. Optics matter. Optics, I repeated. So, he wants a patriotic prop. He wants someone trustworthy. Same thing, different packaging. I walked to the window, needing distance, but Carter followed me with his eyes. I could feel Victoria behind me, silently begging. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that this wasn't just a favor, it was a trap disguised as a lifeline. So, I said, turning back to him, if I agree, what happens next? You'll be flown to Montana tomorrow. The ceremony will be small. Legal, but discreet. After that, you live at Kincaid Ranch. You will have access to his medical team, financial advisors, and security. Your only obligation is to remain his spouse in name and publicly appear supportive. And if I say no? Carter didn't soften it. Your sister will face charges within weeks, possibly days. Victoria made a small sound. Part sob, part panic. I closed my eyes for a moment because taking time to think would look selfish, even if it wasn't. I want to meet him, I said. Carter nodded. He expected that. A car will pick you up at 3 tomorrow. Then he left as efficiently as he arrived. Victoria collapsed onto the couch, covering her face. I'm so sorry, Alicia. You should be, I said, not with anger, just the truth. But being sorry doesn't fix anything, she cried quietly. I sat beside her after a moment and rested a hand on her shoulder. We weren't close, not anymore. Childhood had turned us into teammates. Adulthood turned us into polite strangers, and now we were two women shoved into the same corner of a room with no doors. What happens if this goes wrong? She whispered. Then I'll handle it, I said. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it. I wasn't sure I did, but the words came out anyway. I wasn't one to walk away from a mission once I agreed to it, even this insane, civilian-branded, corporate marriage kind of mission. Night crept in while we sat there. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional clank from the old refrigerator. I stood, grabbed my bag, and headed to the guest room. I didn't feel like talking anymore. I barely felt like thinking. But as soon as I lay down, sleep refused to show up. My brain kept replaying Carter's phrasing, the desperation in Victoria's voice, the sense of something bigger lurking behind all this. Around midnight, I finally closed my eyes, not because I was tired, but because exhaustion eventually wins. By morning, the house felt tense. Victoria made coffee she didn't drink. I tried to act like this was just another assignment, but my stomach had other plans. We didn't say much over breakfast because there wasn't much left to say. She tried to thank me again. I shut that down quickly. At 2:55, a black sedan rolled up in front of the house. Clean, polished, tinted windows, the kind of car that belonged to someone with too much money and too little trust in the world. Victoria stood by the doorway with her hands twisted together. I stepped outside when the driver approached and opened the rear door without a word. Before getting in, I looked back at her. She mouthed, "Thank you." I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hand out forgiveness like discount coupons. I slid into the back seat. The door shut with a soft, final click that felt heavier than it should have. The car pulled away from the curb, Richmond fading behind me, Montana ahead, and somewhere in between, a marriage contract, disguised as salvation, waiting for my signature. The drive to the airport felt longer than it should have, mostly because the driver didn't say a single word the entire time. He didn't even look at me through the mirror. Normally, that level of professionalism would have earned a point in my book, but today it just made the air feel heavier. When we reached the private terminal, a jet was already waiting with its engines humming. No logo, no markings, no welcoming committee, just a ramp and a silent invitation. Inside the cabin, everything was beige, expensive, and minimalistic in a way that screamed money without admitting it. Raymond Carter was seated near the front, working on a tablet. He lifted his head long enough to acknowledge me. "Miss Ward," he said. "You're efficient," I replied. He gestured to me to sit across from him. "We're on a tight schedule." I didn't bother pretending I was relaxed. I buckled in and watched the ground drop away as the jet climbed. The sky outside the window was clean and blue, but inside the cabin felt like stepping into a job interview where the job description was classified, dangerous, and probably had bad health insurance. Carter put the tablet down. "Before you meet Mr. Kincaid, there are things you should know." "Let me guess," I said. "He's not thrilled about this either?" Carter offered something close to a smile, but not quite. "He's aware of the arrangement, but you should expect guardedness. He's been through significant trauma." "What kind?" "Physical and otherwise." That was vague enough to be meaningless, but the way he said it told me pushing would get me nowhere. I settled back into the seat and let the hum of the engines drown out the questions stacking up. Hours later, the jet descended into Montana. Snow covered the ground like powdered sugar, except much less cheerful. The air that hit me when we stepped off the plane was cold enough to slap. A black SUV waited near the runway, because apparently billionaires don't do regular airports. The drive to Kincaid Ranch took another hour through long stretches of land that looked untouched except for the occasional fence and groups of cattle that stared at the SUV like we owed them money. The ranch itself wasn't what I expected. It wasn't flashy. It was big, yes, but understated. The kind of place that came from old wealth rather than flashy tech money. A main house with stone walls, wide porches, and lights glowing behind tall windows. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful for everything happening behind the scenes. Carter led me inside. The warmth hit immediately, followed by the smell of wood smoke and something that reminded me of old books. A woman greeted us in the entryway, mid-60s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a tight bun. "This is Esther," Carter said. "House manager." She shook my hand with a firm grip. "Welcome, Miss Ward." "Thank you," I said, though welcome was a strong word for whatever this was. Esther stepped aside, and Carter motioned toward a hallway. "He's waiting." The hallway was long, lined with framed photos I didn't have time to inspect. At the end was a door slightly ajar. Carter stopped. "He prefers to speak privately first." "You're not coming in?" "No." That didn't help my nerves. But here we were. I pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp on a desk. A man sat near the window in a motorized wheelchair, his back toward me. His shoulders were broad, his posture stiff. When he turned, the first thing I saw was the mask. It covered the right side of his face, smooth, skin-toned, molded to fit. The left side, the part not hidden, was tired. Older, yes, but not weak. His eyes were sharper than I expected. They assessed me the way I assessed threats overseas, quickly, thoroughly, without apology. "Alicia Ward," he said. His voice was deeper than I imagined, controlled, even, with the kind of calm that comes from someone who's used to people listening when he speaks. I nodded. "Mr. Kincaid." He studied me for a long moment. "You're not here because you want to be. I'm here because my family is in trouble." He tilted his head slightly. And you're willing to marry a stranger to protect them? You're willing to marry one to protect your company, I said. So let's not pretend either of us is here for romance. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. He motioned to a chair. I sat, keeping my back straight, unsure how close to be, or how far to stay. You should know, he said. I didn't choose your sister to punish you. She was simply the one being cornered. Doesn't make the situation better. No, he agreed. But you deserve honesty. He shifted his jaw slightly, and I noticed the mask more clearly now. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't for vanity. It was covering something. Something significant. Your accident, I said. Was it really an accident? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a small button on his wheelchair and moved closer, stopping just a few feet in front of me. He reached up slowly and unhooked the mask. It came off with a soft click. I didn't flinch, but my breath stilled. The right side of his face was marked by deep, uneven scarring. Not burns, not an infection. More like damage from blunt force or a crushing impact. Skin grafts ran along his jawline. The tissue was healed but far from natural. This, he said quietly, was the price of trusting the wrong people. I held his gaze. Someone tried to kill you. Yes. And now they want control of your company. Yes. That ties into my sister's situation. Yes. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't framing himself as a victim. He was stating facts the way someone states their height or blood type. Why me? I asked. His voice softened just a degree. Because you understand loyalty. And you don't scare easily. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. He set the mask on the desk. And for a moment, he looked less like a billionaire, and more like a man who had survived something brutal, and didn't bother hiding the aftermath anymore. The ceremony is tomorrow, he said. It will be brief. Afterward, we'll formalize living arrangements. I nodded slowly. Do you want anything from me besides the legal title? Respect, he said. Pragmatism, honesty, and for you to understand that whatever you think this is, the situation is larger. That sounds like a warning. It's a fact. He didn't move closer or raise his voice. He didn't have to. There was something in the room, an undercurrent I couldn't place. Something that felt like a hidden fault line running underneath everything. I pushed my chair back and stood. He didn't stop me. Carter reappeared in the hall like he'd been waiting for the exact moment to escort me out. I followed him without speaking, aware of the silence settling inside me like a puzzle I hadn't figured out yet. Esther led me to a guest room upstairs. It was spacious and warm, with thick blankets and a window overlooking acres of untouched land. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the quiet settle around me. The house was calm, too calm for a place holding secrets big enough to ruin people. I lay back, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. No matter how steady I tried to feel, there was a sensation pulsing under my ribs, something hard to name, a mix of unease and certainty, like stepping into a room where someone just finished whispering. Tomorrow, I'd be legally tied to a man I barely knew, in a place I didn't understand, for reasons I only half believed. But the moment he removed that mask, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever was happening here didn't start with my sister, and it definitely wasn't going to end with me. The morning after, sunlight cut across the room in thin, sharp lines, and for a second I didn't know where I was. The ranch was too quiet. No city noise, no base activity, no hum of people moving around. Just open land and cold air sneaking in through the window frame. I pushed off the blankets and stood, muscles stiff from sleeping in a bed I wasn't ready to claim. The hallway outside was empty. Someone had left a suit bag on a chair, matte black, clearly expensive, with a note taped to it. Formal attire required. No signature, but I could guess. Downstairs, footsteps echoed faintly. A worker carried firewood through the back door. A housekeeper dusted a painting. Everything looked like a calm morning in a perfectly organized estate, except for the knot sitting in my chest. Esther appeared near the kitchen archway, holding a tray. Breakfast, Miss Ward. And Mr. Kincaid asks that you be ready by noon. That sounded like wedding code, the kind no one bothered to decorate with flowers or champagne. He's awake? I asked. He's been up since 5. He prefers to prepare early. I almost smiled. That was the military in him, even after years away. Structure left its fingerprints on you long after the uniform did. I ate quickly, eggs, toast, bacon, nothing fancy, but enough fuel to settle my stomach. When I finished, I went back upstairs and opened the suit bag. Inside was a simple cream-colored dress, knee-length, clean lines, elegant but not dramatic. The kind of dress chosen by someone who was either considerate or cautious. By noon, I was ready. Hair pinned, boots polished, dress fitting better than I expected. A part of me felt like I was gearing up for deployment again, same tightening in the ribs, same mental rehearsal of every possible outcome, same awareness that my life was about to shift whether I wanted it to or not. Downstairs, Carter waited near the front door, stiff as a guardrail. He's already at the courthouse. Courthouse? I asked. Not here? Mr. Kincaid prefers legal simplicity over theatrics. That was one way to put it. The drive into town was short, maybe 15 minutes. The building was small, brick, with an American flag whipping in the wind out front. Not the romantic wedding venue people dream about, but the kind people use when time is short and stakes are high. Carter led me inside. The clerk behind the counter barely lifted her eyes when we entered, then blinked twice when she recognized Kincaid waiting in the corner. Even seated in his wheelchair, he carried the kind of presence that made people straighten up without knowing why. He glanced at me, not judging, not evaluating, just acknowledging I'd shown up. "You're early," he said. "So are you," I replied. His gaze dropped briefly to the dress. Not lingering, just noticing. "You look appropriate." "Good," I said. "I'd hate to overdress for a government office." His mouth twitched. "Humor. Unexpected. I come with layers, I've noticed." Before either of us could step into a deeper conversation, the clerk waved us forward. The process was fast: names, signatures, a few legal warnings neither of us listened to. Carter signed as witness. A second witness, an older woman who seemed to have been drinking coffee since the Reagan era, stamped a set of papers and handed over the certificate. "That's it," she said. "You're married." No applause, no music, no vow exchange. Just a legal transaction with a thin layer of civility. Kincaid held out his hand. I took it, expecting something brittle or cold, but his palm was warm, steady. "Thank you," he said quietly. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? "Congratulations on your strategic acquisition?" Instead, I let go and stepped aside. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than the morning flight. Not uncomfortable, just undefined. Like neither of us wanted to be the first to break whatever temporary ceasefire existed between us. At the estate, Esther greeted us at the door again, but this time her expression softened just enough to count as warmth. "Dinner will be in Mr. Kincaid's quarters at 8. I blinked. "His quarters?" "It is tradition," she said. "A wedding night meal." My pulse skipped. Of course. Wedding night. Even if this marriage wasn't romantic, there were still rituals. Carter handed Kincaid a tablet and disappeared down the hall. Esther turned to me. "You may rest until then. If you need anything, press the call button in your room." I went upstairs and shut the door, leaning against it for a moment. My head felt like a shaken soda can, tight, pressurized, ready to burst if I wasn't careful. I paced once, twice, then changed into something more comfortable, still formal, but less. Wedding. When 8 approached, I forced myself downstairs. The east wing felt different from the rest of the house, darker, quieter. The hall rug muffled my steps. When I knocked, his voice came through the door almost immediately. "Come in." The room smelled like cedar and whiskey. A fire burned low in the hearth. The wheelchair sat beside the table, which was set with 2 plates and a bottle of wine I didn't recognize but knew was expensive. Kincaid was still wearing the mask. "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat, hands folded in my lap. "This isn't what you think," he said. "What do I think?" "That I brought you here for something physical." I didn't answer, but he noticed the tension in my shoulders. "I'm not capable of that," he added simply. "Not anymore." His tone wasn't self-pitying, just matter of fact, like he was explaining weather conditions. "I didn't assume either way," I said. He gave a small nod. Good. I need your presence, not your body. The way he said it, steady and honest, made something loosen inside me, not relief. Not disappointment. Just clarity. We ate in near silence at first. The food was flawless seared steak, roasted vegetables, everything plated like it belonged in a magazine, but he barely touched his meal, focusing more on his wine and the fire. You lost someone, I said, not as a question. His jaw moved, tightening slightly. A daughter. I didn't push. He didn't elaborate. But the weight of the admission hung between us, shifting the air. We talked about travel, then places he'd been, places I'd deployed, places neither of us saw coming. He had a dry sense of humor that slipped out when he wasn't guarding every sentence. It wasn't laughter, but something close. After a while, he set down his glass. Living arrangements. I met his eyes. All right. You'll remain in the guest wing. Independence is important. That works. However, he continued, given my condition, I require assistance more often than I'd like to admit. That's fine. I don't need a nurse, he said. I need someone I trust. The way he said trust made it sound like a currency he rarely spent. We'll figure it out, I said. He nodded once. Slowly. Good. He didn't dismiss me. He didn't ask me to stay. The moment simply continued, unbroken, like the room wasn't waiting for anything to end or begin. The fire popped softly, sending a shimmering arc of sparks up the chimney. Kincaid leaned back, his face half lit, half shadowed behind the mask. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It just felt real. The fire's warmth still clung to my skin as I stepped into the hallway, but the quiet of the house pulled it right out of me. Something about that wing always felt colder, like the air didn't move unless Kincaid did. I headed back toward the guest rooms, trying to shake off the mix of exhaustion and alertness sitting behind my ribs. Halfway up the stairs, I paused. A soft metallic thump echoed faintly from below, too light for furniture, too distinct for the house settling. Instinct kicked in the way it always did. My back straightened. Breath shallow. Steps silent as I retraced my path down the stairs. The sound came again, a sharper clatter this time. I followed it to the east wing, pushing the door open a few inches. No voices. No movement, just the steady crackle of the fire. I stepped inside and scanned the room quickly. Kincaid wasn't in his wheelchair. The chair was angled awkwardly, like it had been pushed too hard. The floorboard near the bathroom door creaked. I crossed the room and eased the door open. He was on the tile, trying to drag himself upright with one working arm. His cane lay several feet away, completely out of reach. Don't move, I said, dropping to a crouch beside him. He looked up sharply, breathing hard. The mask had slipped to his jaw, exposing the entire left side of his face, sunken muscles, frozen eyelid, a scar that cut across his temple like someone had carved it in anger. I didn't stare. I didn't flinch. I just hooked my hands under his arm and helped him sit upright. You shouldn't be walking without support, I said. I wasn't walking, he muttered. I was trying to. I grabbed the cane and set it aside. You could have hit your head. Or broken something. Would have saved everyone time, he said. That's not funny. I wasn't joking. I tightened my grip around his good arm and helped him slide back toward the door. It took longer than it should have. He hated relying on anyone. I could feel the annoyance radiating off him with every struggling inch. When we reached the bed, he pulled his arm free and tried to hoist himself up, but his body didn't cooperate. His foot slipped. I caught him before he could go down again. Stop fighting me, I said. I'm not trying to win a competition. He exhaled sharply, defeated, and let me help him climb back onto the mattress. Once he was seated, he leaned against the headboard and pushed the mask fully back into place. You saw too much. You mean your face? I said. It's fine. No, it's not fine. That's the point. I grabbed the blanket and pulled it over him. You're injured. You're not a monster. Tell that to the mirror, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired, raw in a way I hadn't heard before. You don't need the mask around me, I said, surprising even myself. He looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Everyone needs the mask. He didn't explain what that meant. I didn't ask. I just adjusted the blanket so it wasn't tangled around his leg. Do you want me to call the doctor? No. You can't keep falling like this. I won't, he said. This was an exception. His hand drifted toward the nightstand, fumbling for something. A small bottle rattled as he reached it. Painkillers? I asked. Antispasmodics. He tried to twist the cap, but couldn't get leverage. His fingers trembled too hard. When the bottle slipped again, I took it gently from his hand. He didn't protest. I opened it, shook out the dose he needed, and handed it to him with a glass of water. His hand steadied as he drank. I didn't leave after that. Not immediately. His breathing settled, but his eyes stayed open, watching the fire through the gap between the logs. You ever think, he said quietly, about the life you were supposed to have? I sat back in the chair beside the bed. Everyone does. What was yours? Military career. Promotions. Maybe a family later. I shrugged. Nothing fancy. Just stability. He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Stability is a myth. You'd know, I guess. Yes, he said, adjusting his position slightly. I would. His voice softened. Did you ever regret joining the military? No, I said. But it didn't protect me from everything. It never does. There was a heaviness in the room that didn't feel uncomfortable, just present, like we were both acknowledging pieces of ourselves we didn't normally say out loud. He closed his eye briefly. You didn't have to help me. I know. Then why did you? The question wasn't a trap. It wasn't manipulative. It was honest. You're my husband, I said. The legal kind, sure, but still. And I'm not leaving a man on a bathroom floor. His throat bobbed. I didn't expect that. Most decent people would do the same. No, he said. They wouldn't. I didn't argue. It wasn't worth debating. Instead, I shifted in the chair and crossed my arms, watching the last of the firewood collapse into glowing coals. You keep looking at me like you're waiting for something, I said. I'm waiting to see if you regret it. Regret what? This marriage. I looked at him for a long moment. If I regretted it, I wouldn't be here. He nodded once, absorbing that. His breathing slowed. His eyelid fluttered, the good one, and I could tell the medication was beginning to settle into his system. The room went quieter, almost too quiet, the way rooms do when someone is close to sleep but not fully gone. A log crackled softly in the fireplace, sending a faint pattern of shadows across the walls. Kincaid's hand rested on the blanket, open, palm facing upward, not reaching for anything but not closed off either. I stayed in the chair, letting the warmth of the fire settle into the space between us. Nothing about the moment felt finished or interrupted. It simply continued, steady and unbroken, the air holding everything without demanding anything back. The fire had settled into a low glow when I finally stepped out of Kincaid's room. The hallway felt warmer than usual, probably because the adrenaline was fading and my body was catching up. I rubbed the stiffness out of my neck as I made my way toward the guest wing. The house quiet enough that my footsteps sounded louder than they should. Halfway down the hall, a muffled knock echoed from the front of the estate, 3 quick taps, then silence. Not the kind of knock a visitor makes. More like someone who's not sure they're supposed to be there. I checked the time on a wall clock. Too late for deliveries, too early for staff changes. Whoever it was didn't belong at that hour. When I reached the foyer, Carter stood with one hand on the door, jaw tight. He glanced back at me, then opened a narrow gap. A woman stepped inside, mid-30s, perfectly styled hair, navy dress coat hugging her figure, sunglasses still on even though it was dark outside. She carried a purse that cost more than my truck back home. The second she removed the sunglasses, I knew exactly who she was. You must be the new wife, she said. Who are you? I asked, already knowing the answer. She smiled like someone signing an autograph. Madeline Kincaid, Charles's sister. Carter cleared his throat. Miss Kincaid wasn't expected. I wasn't invited either, she said, but here I am. She looked me over the same way people inspect fruit at a grocery store, checking for bruises, flaws, expiration dates. So this is what desperate looks like, she said. I'll be honest, I pictured someone taller. I blinked slowly. And I pictured someone nicer. Her smile sharpened. Cute. Carter shifted, lowering his voice. Miss Kincaid. Your brother is resting. It's not a good time. She brushed past him without hesitation. Every time is a good time when your brother signs his life away to a stranger. I stepped in front of her, blocking the hallway. You're not going anywhere near him. She stopped just short of bumping into me. You misunderstand. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to confirm. Confirm what? That you're real. She said it like she was checking if I was a hologram or a scam artist. Unfortunately for you, I said, I'm very real. Oh, I can see that, she replied, leaning casually on a nearby console table. But I need something more than a glance and a ring. I crossed my arms. You should leave, and you should stop pretending you know what you've married into. Something in her tone didn't match the polished exterior. Her eyes weren't cold, they were calculating. Like someone taking inventory of liabilities. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. Not a weapon, not a threat. A will, the old version, by the look of it. He didn't change it, she said. Not yet, anyway. Which means everything still comes to me. I didn't respond. She was watching for any flicker of reaction. I heard, she continued, voice dropping, that he plans to rewrite it this week. Funny timing, don't you think? A sudden marriage followed by a sudden legal update. Looks a little engineered. You done? I asked. Not remotely, she said. She pushed off the table and stepped closer. Too close. The perfume was expensive, sharp, and unnecessarily aggressive. Charles is vulnerable, she said. He's physically weak, emotionally unstable, and let's be honest, not thinking clearly. You? You're an opportunist who walked in at the perfect moment. You're wrong, I said. No, she said calmly. You're dangerous. That word hit differently. She didn't mean it figuratively. She meant it like a fact she was certain she could prove. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed from the east wing. Both of us turned. Kincaid rolled into view, mask on, jaw clenched tight. He must have heard enough to come on his own. Madeline, he said. She straightened instantly. Charles, I said I didn't want visitors, he said. You said that before you married a stranger. This doesn't concern you. I think it does, she said. You're not thinking straight. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, he replied. She scoffed. Because of her? She's here for the money. If she wanted the money, he said quietly, she would have let me fall tonight. Her face drained of color, just slightly. What are you talking about? I fell, he said. She helped me. You weren't here. Madeline blinked, taken off guard for the first time since stepping inside. She opened her mouth, paused, recalculated. That doesn't change anything. It changes enough, he said. Go home. She didn't move. Now, he added, voice firm enough to slice through the tension. Madeline pressed her lips together and slid her sunglasses back on. This isn't over. He didn't respond. She turned sharply and walked past me. The door closed a moment later, the echo stretching longer than it should have. Silence settled again, heavy and uneven. Kincaid let out a breath. She's always been theatrical. That wasn't theatrical, I said. That was a threat. She won't act on it. You sure about that? He paused. No. Something in the honesty of that answer made the room feel smaller. I should have prepared you, he said. Madeline doesn't like losing, especially control. And what does she want control of? Everything, he said. He shifted slightly, gripping the wheel rim with his good hand. I didn't want you dragged into this so quickly. You married me, I said. I was dragged in the second we signed papers. His mouth tightened, not in anger but recognition. You're right. Carter returned from the doorway, clearing his throat. She's gone. Good, Kincaid said. She'll be back, I murmured. Neither of them argued. Kincaid adjusted the angle of his chair. You didn't need to step in earlier. Someone had to, I said. His gaze held mine longer this time. You're not afraid of her. No, you should be. That's not how I'm wired. He huffed a short breath, almost a laugh. I'm beginning to see that. I glanced toward the front door where Madeline had disappeared into the night. The cold air still seeped through the frame, carrying the same feeling she left behind, calculated, controlled, unfinished. Kincaid rested his hand on the wheel. You should get some sleep. You too, I said. He didn't argue. Carter stepped behind him to guide the chair back toward the east wing, but Kincaid lifted a hand. I've got it. And he did slowly, carefully, with a steadiness that had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with stubbornness. I watched until he turned the corner and disappeared into the dim hallway, the soft sound of his wheel rims brushing against the floor, runner leaving a path of quiet movement behind him that didn't feel like an ending or a pause. It felt like part of the same breath the night had already drawn. The house settled into a strange quiet after Madeline left, the kind that doesn't match the hour or the weather. It wasn't peaceful or calm. It was the kind of quiet that sits behind your ears and makes you listen harder without knowing why. I walked back toward my room, but my pulse hadn't slowed since the moment she'd stepped inside. Sleep wasn't happening. My nerves were still wired from the confrontation, and my brain refused to power down. I changed into a t-shirt and soft pants, then headed to the kitchen for water. The place was dim except for the under-cabinet lights, humming faintly. I stood there for a second, letting the cool air hit my skin, a shadow past the far hallway. 2 seconds. Too tall to be Esther, too heavy in step to be either housekeeper. And Carter didn't move with uncertainty. Whoever this was, didn't know the layout well. I set the water down silently. The figure turned left toward the office wing, and instinct took over before doubt could crawl in. I followed, footsteps soft on the wood floor, staying far enough to stay out of sight but close enough that I wouldn't lose him. He moved like someone searching, not sneaking, not curious, purposeful, but also nervous, shoulders tight, head jerking slightly at each doorway. He stopped at the junction near Kincaid's study. That was enough. I stepped forward. Hey. He jumped so hard he nearly hit the wall. He spun around, and I recognized him, one of the newer grounds crew, early 20s, too clean to have actually done any work today. What are you doing inside? I asked. He swallowed hard. Carter asked me to check the breaker box. Nice try. The breaker box is outside. He stood frozen, eyes darting, waiting for me to blink long enough for him to bolt. I didn't blink. Do you know what happens? I said, keeping my voice calm, when someone sneaks around a house with a disabled billionaire inside and a recently woken-up military officer watching. He shook his head. Neither do I said. But we're about to find out. His lips parted like he wanted to defend himself, but whatever excuse he'd prepared evaporated. He looked past me, like the hallway might give him an escape route if he stared at it hard enough. Let's go, I said, jerking my head toward the foyer. You're not wandering around alone. He didn't argue. He walked ahead of me, trembling just slightly. When we reached the living room, Carter was already waiting. Jaw clenched tight. What's going on? He asked. I nodded toward the kid. I caught him near the office wing, inside the house, at midnight. Carter's expression didn't change, if anything, it flattened. Go home, he told the kid, but... Now. The grounds worker bolted through the side door so fast he nearly slipped on the welcome rug. When he was gone, Carter rubbed his forehead. Sorry you had to see that. He's not here to trim hedges, I said. No, Carter admitted. Madeline hired him, said it was temporary. She sent him tonight? He didn't answer. You need to tell Kincaid, I said. And say what? Carter asked. That his sister is suspicious of his wife? Or that she's trying to poke around the estate again? He already knows how she is. That's not how she is. That's calculated. Carter let out a slow breath. She's not the only one watching. My spine straightened. Meaning what exactly? Meaning things are moving around him. Parts of the company. Some private contracts. A supplier Kincaid fired last year, people who feel like they should still be in his orbit but aren't. When someone that wealthy loses full control of their mobility. The shark's circle. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? I thought it would settle on its own. That's not how sharks work. He didn't argue. He just stared at the dark window like something might be waiting outside. We need to keep an eye on everyone coming in and out of this place, I said. Carter nodded, still staring. I'll tighten things up. I headed back to the guest wing, but the uneasy feeling stuck under my ribs like a stone. I paced once, twice, then grabbed a hoodie and left the room again. There was no way I'd sleep without checking on Kincaid. When I reached his wing, a faint glow seeped from under his door. He wasn't asleep. I knocked softly. "Come in," he said immediately. I stepped inside. He sat in his chair near the fire, mask on, blanket across his lap. He looked at me longer than usual, not analyzing, just seeing me. "You're awake," I said. "So are you." I pulled a chair closer. "You heard what happened with the grounds worker?" "I did. Madeline sent him." "Yes." "You're not surprised?" "No." His tone wasn't angry or resigned, it was factual, like he'd expected it long before it happened. "She's escalating," I said. "People don't snoop around houses unless they're looking for something. Or someone," he said quietly. That landed harder than I expected. "What would she want from you that badly?" I asked. "Control," he said. "She wants control of the company, and she can't get it while I'm alive." His words were so blunt they almost sounded rehearsed. "Is she capable of anything more than snooping?" I asked. He shifted his gaze toward the fire. "If you're asking whether she'd hurt me, no, not directly. Madeline doesn't get dirty. She finds people willing to get dirty for her, like that assistant supplier you mentioned," I said. "Or the former board member who thinks he deserves a comeback. Or the contractor who still thinks I ruined him for pulling out of an unethical deal." He paused. "There's a long list." I leaned back. "You're in a viper pit." "Yes," he said calmly. "And you walked into it with me. That wasn't guilt. It wasn't a warning. It was acknowledgement. You should have told me all this sooner," I said. "I didn't want you to feel trapped." "I already felt trapped," I said. "This is just context." His eyes softened behind the mask. "You're handling this better than most. Most people haven't done deployment rotations." He let out a faint breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Fair point." I watched him adjust the blanket on his leg. The tremor in his hand was smaller tonight. Controlled. "You didn't come here just to check on me," he said. "No," I admitted. I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. "You were right. Doesn't make me feel better." "It shouldn't," he said. "But it makes you sharper." He wasn't wrong. The alertness buzzing under my skin wasn't fading. It was turning into something else. Focus. Kincaid leaned back, letting his weight settle evenly into the chair. "You didn't panic tonight." "I don't panic." "And you didn't back down from Madeline. She didn't deserve anything else. And you caught a man sneaking through my house. He wasn't very subtle." "No," he said, "but you were very fast." He paused, studying me in a way that didn't feel invasive. "You're becoming part of this place," he said. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because I didn't know what that meant yet. The fire shifted, crackling softly. Kincaid's breathing evened out, steady and calm, but his posture stayed alert enough that I could tell he wasn't letting his guard down either. I stayed there in the chair, letting the warmth from the hearth settle into my arms and shoulders, the steady glow holding the room together the same way it had the night before, unbroken, continuing without a clear start or finish, the moment stretching forward in its own quiet motion. The fire's heat still clung to my arms as I stepped back into the hallway, that same quiet humming behind my ribs. Sleep wasn't going to show up tonight, not with the adrenaline still sitting like static under my skin. I headed toward the kitchen for water, but my phone buzzed before I got halfway down the stairs. "Unknown number. Local area code," I answered. "This is Ward." A man's voice rushed in. "Ma'am, this is Officer Landon with the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. Are you related to a Miss Victoria Ward?" Every muscle in my back pulled tight. "Yes, I'm her sister, but she's in Richmond." "She's not in Richmond, ma'am. We found her collapsed on a sidewalk downtown near the airport. Looks like an attack." My grip tightened on the banister. "Why is she in Montana?" "She told us she flew in to see you. She had a flight ticket in her pocket. The ambulance just brought her in. I'm on my way." I hung up, already turning back toward the stairs. Carter stepped into view like he'd been shadowing the whole conversation. "What happened?" he asked. "My sister was attacked. Here. In town." His expression didn't change, but something sharpened behind his eyes. "You need a ride. I can take the truck." "You shouldn't drive in that state," he said. "I'll get the car." He didn't wait for me to argue. He moved with purpose, the kind you trust without needing an explanation. I grabbed my jacket and followed him outside. The night air slapped cold against my face. The stars were mostly drowned out by clouds, but the quiet countryside had never felt so far from the world I'd left behind. When Carter pulled up in the SUV, I climbed in and shut the door hard enough that it rattled. "Thank you," I muttered. He nodded, started the engine, and we headed toward town. The interior of the car stayed dim. No music, no chatter, just the low hum of tires eating asphalt. My leg bounced the whole ride, nerves firing too fast to sit still. "You think this is connected," Carter said after a long stretch of silence. "My sister doesn't fly across the country just to get mugged," I said. "She came here for a reason, and someone stopped her." "Yes." I stared out the window, jaw clenched. He gave a slow nod, keeping his eyes on the road. "You're not wrong. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want a theory, I wanted facts." Traffic thinned as we approached the local hospital, glowing harsh white against the night sky. My pulse kicked even harder. Carter parked in the emergency lot, and I jumped out before the engine fully stopped. He followed close behind. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast everything in that washed-out hospital glow that makes everyone look a little ghostly. A nurse at the triage desk recognized my name immediately and led us down the hallway. When we reached the room, I pushed the door open without waiting. Victoria sat propped on a pillow, a faint cut above her cheekbone, lip swollen, jacket torn on one sleeve. She looked like she'd tried to fight back and lost the first round but not the second. "Jesus." "Vic," I said, stepping to her bedside. Her eyes lit up with relief, but she tried to act tougher than she felt. "Surprise? What are you doing here?" I asked. She winced when she shifted. "I needed to tell you something. In person, I didn't trust the phones." "Who did this?" I asked, gesturing to her face. "No idea." I was leaving the diner near the rental car lot, and someone grabbed me from behind, threw me to the pavement. I kicked, scratched, did everything I could, but, she gestured at her injuries. "You can see how that went." "What did he look like?" I asked. I didn't see his face. He wore a hoodie, gloves. She swallowed. "He didn't take my purse." I felt the cold drop straight into my stomach. "So it wasn't a robbery?" "No." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "He said something." I leaned in. "What?" She looked toward the door like someone might be listening. He said, "Tell your sister to stay in her lane." Then he ran. Carter's jaw clenched. My hands curled into fists. "That was a message." Victoria nodded. "Yeah. I figured that out." I stared at her for a moment, anger simmering under my ribs. Someone came after her because they couldn't get to me. My sister, the only family member who never asked anything of me besides honesty, was lying in a hospital bed because of something tied to the Kincaid mess I was now stuck inside. "You're coming back to the ranch," I said. Victoria's eyes widened. "Is it safe?" "It's safer than a motel," she exhaled. "Fine, but I'm not riding in the trunk." "That can be arranged," I said. She rolled her eyes. "God, you're still impossible." The doctor entered, clipboard in hand. "Miss Ward, we'll need to observe you for a few hours, but there's no concussion. Your vitals are steady." "Great," Victoria said. "Does that mean I can leave before sunrise?" "We'll see." He left us alone. Victoria looked at Carter for the first time. "And who's this? You got yourself a bodyguard?" "Something like that," I said. Carter gave a polite nod. "Ma'am." She raised a brow. "He's polite. That's suspicious." "He works for Charles," I said. "He helps keep things running." "And keeps you alive," Carter added quietly. Victoria blinked at him, then looked back at me. "Okay. That's not ominous at all." I didn't sugarcoat it. "You were attacked because of me." She stiffened. "No. Stop. Don't do that. Someone sent a message. Maybe you think you're dangerous," she said. "But I know you. You're not reckless. You don't make enemies like this." I gave a humorless laugh. "I married one." She stared. "This is because of him?" "Not necessarily him." "Then who?" "The people who want what he has," I said. The room fell silent. Carter shifted near the door. "Ma'am, the hospital has cameras. I'll pull footage. We'll find something. Thank you, I said. Victoria relaxed slightly. At least someone here has a plan. I squeezed her hand. We're going to fix this. Her eyes softened. I know. The door opened again as a nurse came in to check her vitals. Carter stepped outside to call someone. I sat beside my sister, watching her breathe, watching the bruise form on her cheekbone, trying to memorize every detail so I would never underestimate whoever did this. Victoria adjusted her pillow. Hey, she whispered. You okay? No, I said plainly. But you're alive. Yeah, she murmured. I am. I sat there longer than I intended, watching her settle, watching the monitors stabilize, letting the anger simmer into something sharper and colder. Someone had stepped across a line. The hospital lights hummed faintly overhead, steady and clinical, as the air between us stayed taut and anchored, the moment holding without breaking or settling into anything that felt finished. The monitors kept their steady rhythm as Victoria drifted into a shallow sleep, her breathing evening out just enough for her shoulders to stop trembling. I sat still for another moment, letting the room settle around me, letting the anger cool into something that didn't shake my hands. Anger was useless without direction. Calm was the weapon. When the nurse stepped back in to take Victoria's vitals, I slipped out into the hallway. Carter was at the far end, talking quietly into his phone. The second he saw me, he ended the call and pocketed the device. Anything? I asked. Security footage shows a man in a hoodie tailing her for at least 2 blocks, he said. Camera caught the jacket, the height, the way he moved. Couldn't see his face. Pro? I asked. Not polished, Carter said. But not random either. A middle ground man. Someone paid enough to be motivated, not enough to be untraceable. Where was he before he tailed her? I asked. That's what I'm working on, Carter said. He came out of a parking garage near the diner. No record of him entering. No plates visible. Meaning someone picked him up? I said. Or dropped him off. Carter nodded. Exactly. Who did you call? I asked. Someone who owes me a favor, he said. Former analyst. She's good with surveillance networks. She'll run cross-angle footage. Good. He studied me for a second. You planning something? I'm thinking, I said. That's what I'm worried about. We headed back to the waiting area. A wall-mounted TV played a late-night show with the volume barely above a whisper. The host laughed at his own joke. No one else did. What do you know about that defense contractor you mentioned? I asked. Kane Logistics, Carter said. They used to supply high-end components for Kincaid's R&D projects. When Charles cut ties with them, they lost millions. And they blamed him. I said. Of course they blamed him. Any reason they'd be in Montana? Carter rubbed his jaw. Their HQ is in Houston, but they've got secondary operations all over the West. It wouldn't be hard for them to place someone here. Would Madeline reach out to them? I asked. Madeline doesn't get her hands dirty, Carter said. But she knows people who do, and those people know other people who owe favors. And favors stack, I said. Yes, he said. And right now, they're stacking in one direction. I leaned back, arms crossed. We need proof, and fast, Carter said. Because whoever did this to your sister didn't send the final message. The line hit harder than he intended. I stared at the entrance doors, watching the automatic glass slide open and closed with each visitor. Everything about the hospital was too bright, too clean, too exposed. Does Kincaid know yet? I asked. I texted him, Carter said. He's awake. I nodded and stood. Let's go. We walked back to Victoria's room. She was asleep, the swelling on her cheek already turning a darker shade. I pulled the blanket up around her shoulders, tucked it lightly behind her arm. She's safe here? I asked. Yes, Carter said. Hospital security won't let anyone in without ID. Good. I stepped back out into the hallway and called Kincaid. He answered on the first ring. Your sister? He asked. She's alive, I said. Stable. She was targeted. The attacker told her to warn me. There was a long silence, not hesitation, calculation. Where are you now? He asked. Still at the hospital. Come back to the ranch. We're not running. This isn't running, he said. This is consolidation. Carter listened, arms folded. He's right, he said quietly. We need to get ahead of this while we still can. I hated that both of them made sense. We're leaving when the doctor clears her, I said. I'll have a room prepared for her next to yours, Kincaid said. Security will be tripled. And, Madeline, she won't get near the property again, he said. He didn't explain how. I didn't ask. When the call ended, Carter checked the hallway before we moved. I went back inside Victoria's room and waited until the doctor returned with discharge papers. Victoria was tired and bruised, but she insisted she could walk on her own. Carter brought the SUV around, and we helped her into the back seat. The drive home was quiet. Victoria rested her head against the window, eyes half open. When the ranch came into view, lit by exterior lamps that made the property look like its own small world, she sat up straighter. "This is where you live now?" she asked. "For now," I said. "It looks like a retirement home for rich cowboys." Something like that. Inside, the house felt different with her in it. Less like a fortress, more like a reality check. Esther appeared from the hallway, looking genuinely surprised. "Oh," she said. "You must be her sister." Victoria waved weakly. "Hi. I promise I'm not bleeding on anything." "We'll get a room ready," Esther said. Carter disappeared down the hallway, probably to coordinate security with staff. I walked Victoria upstairs, her steps slow but steady. When we reached the room next to mine, she sank onto the bed. "I'll be fine," she said. "Really? You should sleep. You should too." I didn't answer. She shifted onto her side, wincing. "Hey," she murmured, eyes half closed. "Don't carry everything alone." "I'm not." "You are," she said, "but it's okay. You've always done that." Her breathing evened out before I could respond. I stepped into the hallway just as Carter rounded the corner with a tablet in hand. "My analyst friend found something," he said. "Not the attacker, but someone else." "Who?" He handed me the tablet. Grainy footage filled the screen security camera from outside a parking garage in town. A woman in a sleek coat stepped into frame. She looked familiar even before she turned her head toward the camera. Madeline. She wasn't talking to the attacker. She wasn't near him at all. But she was handing a man a sealed envelope, and he walked toward the garage exit 30 seconds before the attacker appeared on footage tailing Victoria. "So she helped coordinate," I said. "Looks like it," Carter replied. "Not directly, but enough." My pulse tightened. She paid someone to send a warning. Maybe more. I handed the tablet back. "We confront her. And say what? That she was in a public place handing someone an envelope? It won't stick." I hated that he was right. "We need something concrete," he said. "Something that ties her to the contractor, or the money, or whoever hired the guy. And we're running out of time," I said. "Yes." The hallway went quiet except for the distant sound of a door closing in the east wing. "Kincaid." He rolled toward us, mask on, posture firm. His eyes flicked from me to Carter, reading every detail in the space between us. "What did you find?" he asked. Carter lifted the tablet slightly. Kincaid didn't take it, he simply waited for the explanation. "Your sister had contact with someone connected to the attack," I said. "Not directly, but enough to be involved." He didn't blink. "Show me." Carter pulled up the footage again. Kincaid watched it without a single reaction, no surprise, no anger, just a tightening in his jaw, a stillness in his shoulders. "She escalated," he said. "Yes," Carter replied. "And she won't stop," I said. "No," Kincaid agreed quietly. His gaze lifted, sharp behind the mask. "Then neither will we." He turned the chair slightly, wheels whispering against the floor runner, the movement steady and deliberate as the firelight from the east wing stretched across the hallway in a long, unbroken line. Kincaid turned toward the office wing without waiting for anyone to follow, and Carter and I fell in step behind him. The wheels of his chair moved with more force than usual, each push sharp enough to show exactly how far past patience he was. When we reached his office, he nodded for Carter to shut the door, then positioned himself behind the desk. "Madeline didn't plan this alone," he said. "She doesn't have the skill. She has connections," I said. "And she knows how to use them." He lifted his gaze toward Carter. "Call in every contract record from the past 5 years. Anyone tied to Kane Logistics. Anyone tied to subcontractors connected to them. Pull everything. Already started, Carter replied. Kincaid turned the screen of his desktop toward us. Dozens of files were open company correspondence, vendor reports, internal audits. There's a pattern, he said. Money disappearing from side accounts. Funding routed through dummy LLCs. Payments small enough to avoid flags, consistent enough to build leverage. They've been bleeding your company, I said. For over a year, he replied. I missed it. You were recovering from your stroke, I said. You weren't running the numbers daily. I should have been. His voice didn't waver, but the guilt behind it was thick. Madeline knew I was vulnerable. She used the gap. The screen reflected faint light on his mask, the shine cutting across the edges like a thin scar. What's the leverage for? I asked. Carter answered. Control of the board, enough influence to force a vote to remove him. And install who? I asked. Someone they can manipulate. Kincaid said. Madeline doesn't want to run the company. She wants the money and the power to hand it to the people who promised her a cut. She sold you out, I said. He didn't deny it. He just moved the next file onto the screen. An email chain. Payments. A contract request from Kane Logistics disguised as a proposal for a philanthropic partnership. They want back in, he said. They've wanted it since I cut ties. My refusal cost them millions. So they tried to take the company instead, I said. Through your sister. He nodded once. And when that wasn't enough, they aimed for your sister. Psychological leverage. They miscalculated, I said. He looked at me longer than necessary. Yes, they did. Carter's tablet chimed. A new file appeared, a compiled link chart, connection lines branching across names, dates, transactions. We have it, he said. The evidence tying Madeline to Kane Logistics. Not directly, but close enough to build a case. What about the attacker? I asked. Still missing, Carter said. But if we expose the money trail, he doesn't matter. The source does. We're doing this legally? I asked. Yes, Kincaid said, but not quietly. His tone carried the certainty of a man who'd spent decades dealing with people who underestimated him. Carter turned the tablet toward me. Everything here goes to federal investigators in the morning, the SEC, the DOJ, and Charles is sending a full internal report to his board at the same time. You're cutting her out completely, I said. Yes, he said. And I'm ending her leverage. He reached into the drawer beside him and removed a folder. Financial documents, property deeds, stock certificates. I prepared this years ago for emergencies. What is it? I asked. A contingency, he said. A trust fund. For you. I didn't speak. The room held still, like it was waiting for me to exhale. He continued. You refused the will. You refused to be bought. But you earned this. Not as payment. Not as leverage. As stability. That's not necessary, I said. Victoria was attacked, he replied. Your involvement with me puts you at risk. This protects you whether I'm here or gone. I swallowed slowly. I didn't ask for this. And I didn't ask for someone who actually gives a damn, he said. Yet here we are. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest in a way that stripped the room bare. Carter stepped aside to take another call. Kincaid rolled slightly closer, the mask catching the low lamplight. I want you to have a future, he said. One that isn't tied to danger or charity. One that's yours. I rested my hands on the desk. You're not dying yet. I'm not planning to, he replied. But I'm not ignoring reality either. The truth sat between us with the same weight as the evidence piled on his screen. A knock sounded at the door. Esther stepped inside without crossing the threshold. Madeline Kincaid is at the gate, she said. She's demanding to see you. She won't, Kincaid said. Esther nodded. Understood. She come alone? I asked. No, Esther said. Private security. 3 cars. Carter hung up his call, jaw tight. Federal partners are prepping. She won't wait an hour, I said. Kincaid looked at me. She wants leverage before the board meeting tomorrow. We're not opening the gate, Carter said. She won't leave until she realizes she has no leverage left, Kincaid replied. As if on cue, Headlights swept across the windows, bright, insistent. Madeline wasn't coming to talk. She was coming to demand control of a world that was no longer hers. Kincaid didn't move, didn't flinch. She can sit out there. Carter checked the monitors. She's yelling at the security camera. What's she saying? I asked. That her brother needs guardianship, Carter said. And that you, he added, nodding at me, manipulated him. Kincaid let out a short breath that wasn't quite humor. She's improvising. She's desperate, I said. And dangerous, Carter added. On the screen, Madeline paced in front of her car, shouting something enough to redden her face. Two men in suits hovered behind her, uncertain whether they were backup or witnesses. Kincaid reached for the keyboard and pulled up the prepared email packet. The evidence, the financial links, the timestamps. Send it, he said. Carter tapped the final command. The files shot across government channels with silent efficiency. Federal agents have been staged 3 miles down the road since I identified the threat pattern, Carter said quietly. They were just waiting for this official filing to make the arrest legal. Within minutes, confirmation receipts pinged back. Accepted, logged, filed, active. Madeline didn't know it yet, but every avenue she'd relied on had just snapped shut. The gate camera showed her yelling into the intercom again, voice muffled. Carter muted the feed. You filing the board notice too? I asked. Yes, Kincaid said. Right now. When the message was sent, he leaned back in his chair. His hands were steady, his voice steady. The chaos outside wasn't chaos to him, it was the last breath of something that had been rotting for a long time. On the monitor, the flashing lights of approaching government vehicles glowed faintly as they turned down the long private road toward the gate. Madeline finally stopped yelling when she saw them. Her body stiffened. The men behind her stepped back. Carter exhaled slowly. It's over. No, Kincaid said. It's corrected. The agent spoke to her through the gate. She didn't resist, but the tightness in her posture showed she understood exactly how fast her world had tilted out of her reach. Minutes later, her cars pulled away, boxed in by federal vehicles escorting them down the road. Inside the office, the glow of the monitors dimmed. The room settled not in relief, but in the steady shift of something realigned. Kincaid removed the mask slowly, setting it on the desk. His face scarred, uneven, human caught the soft light. He didn't hide. He didn't apologize for existing. I met his eyes. You good? He nodded once. You? I sat back, letting out the breath I'd been holding for hours. Now I am. The house didn't feel like a fortress then. It felt like a place where things could finally land where they belonged. Kincaid closed the last file on the screen. Let's go check on your sister. He turned his chair toward the hallway, the wheels rolling over the floor in a steady, even rhythm that didn't mark an ending or a beginning, just the next natural movement in a night that had finally stopped circling.